You're listening to Business Lunch with Roland Frasier. This is your seat at the table.
Hey everybody, Roland Frasier here. Welcome to this episode of Business Lunch. And I'm very excited today to have the opportunity for us to chat with Yanik Silver, who I have heard about for years and years before I got a chance to meet him. And he's just one of the best networkers and marketers that you would ever want to run across, and does all kinds of cool things, from events with Richard Branson to his Mavericks get-togethers, his mastermind, where they fly fighter jets and things, all kinds of cool stuff like that. And also, Yanik introduced two of my business partners, Ryan Dice and Perry Belcher, to the world of finer wines through a tasting that we're just talking about a few minutes ago. And Ryan and Perry actually decided to be partners at one of your dinners. I don't know if you've ever heard that story, but everybody was scrambling. It was a heavy wine dinner, pretty expensive tab, and Perry's like, everybody was scrambling to like, who's going to pay? And I looked at Ryan, I was like, let's just pick this up. And he's like, they just picked it up. And after that, they were like, okay, well, obviously we need to be partners because we think alike. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Roland. Yeah, I knew somehow Ryan and Perry had gotten together, I think in I don't run it anymore, but an internet marketing mastermind group. And so I love the fact that I had a small part to play in what has become an amazing ripple of impact and good in the world.
Yeah, and you had a lot of. I mean, you've organized, and you did the undergrounds originally, right, as well?
Yeah, a decade of underground. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was another place I think Perry may have sold for the first time there. He sold it like a trip to China, and he didn't. So it's fun. Yeah. You are a thread that runs through the fabric of a lot of the online marketing community. Would you share with us just kind of like what that story is, how you got started, and even before the internet, if you like? I always like to explore the entrepreneurial journey, and you've had such a robust one. I'd love to hear the full scoop.
Sure. It started, I always say it started with my dad and my mom coming over here from Russia when I was 3 years old. So we came over. My dad he just corrected me the other day, and I can't remember the exact number. I always say 256, and he told me it was 286 or something, or whatever it was. I'm like, well, it's close enough. He's like, no, this is the right number. And so whatever the number was, but it was in that neighborhood of about $300. And so he came over, and within about 6 months, he got fired at his job of repairing medical equipment at a local hospital because he was moonlighting on the side, repairing medical equipment for some doctors. And so he took the route that many of us do as entrepreneurs, which is the very much less secure, but our own individual sovereignty. And so he said, okay, I'm gonna do my own thing. And so I grew up working for a family business, which meant that at 14 years old, I was telemarketing for latex gloves, had my own clients, making my own sales that way. And at 16, the deal was I got a car if I cold called on doctors. And so I'm this little 16-year-old punk. You're
a 16-year-old kid cold calling on doctors. That must have been an interesting reception.
It was, it sucked, to put it bluntly. But it taught me a lot, and it also taught me that I didn't like cold calling. But I had this one doctor who became a friend of mine and my favorite client. He ended up buying like an entire surgery center for me, and so it was like, I don't know, $30,000, $40,000 of equipment that I sold him. So a huge sale for me. And he's like, hey, you kind of like marketing stuff? Because I'd been writing my dad's ads, which were terrible at the time. Like we'd have a huge whale on top and it'd be like, this is a whale of a deal or something.
That's awesome.
That's like completely terrible stuff. And he's like, here, check out this Jay Abraham tape. I just got back from a Jay Abraham seminar. And he's like,
he went or you went?
He went, the doctor.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And he's like, would your dad ever send you? I'm like, no. It was a $5,000 seminar. And he's like, okay, well, listen to this tape. It was the Tony Robbins, Jay Abraham tape on optimization. And it just like turned the lights on for me about direct response marketing and how you could get people to take action without talking to them. And I was like, just fascinated by this idea. And so I had also been studying like Earl Nightingale and different success philosophers at that time. So kind of a weird kid, I guess, because I was 16, 17, 18, and my hockey buddies, I played ice hockey. My hockey buddies are in my car. They're like, what are all these tapes? I'm like, don't worry about it. And so I'm listening to like Earl Nightingale. It's like, you can become an expert in any category by studying or learning for 1 hour a day. And I'm like, well, what happens if you do it for 2 hours a day? And so I just was fascinated by direct response marketing, psychology, and what could happen. So I started applying this to my dad's business, and we grew from a little regional player to a national player, because we would start running ads for, I was writing very long form ads, like Joe Sugarman style ads for very complicated medical equipment. And it would get doctors, instead of me cold calling, I'd get doctors that were on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being ready to give us their credit card, to 7, 8, 9s, and 10s. And some, just giving us money. Some were like, hey, let me talk to you about whatever it was, an EKG machine or a fetal Doppler, or whatever.
High dollar sales for that kind of demand. That's great.
And really interesting stuff that you had to figure out what are the benefits of it, and what are the CPT codes, and how to sell it to, like, so it was a fascinating thing. And so for a long time I thought I was going to grow my dad's business and then take it over. And then I just got this itch to like go do my own thing. And so I had other doctors that wanted me to help them with their marketing. And so I started working with other doctors, and I'm like, okay, well, there's kind of a limited amount of room for be a consultant. I'm like, well, and then I started learning about Dan Kennedy, and I learned about taking information and selling information. And I created a course for dermatologists first, but it ended up being all cosmetic surgeons and plastic surgeons, ophthalmologists. But the very first thing was I advertised on Dermatologic Surgery News, or Dermatologic Surgery Journal or something.
A print publication, right?
Yeah, print publication. It's on everybody's, I'm sure, on their coffee tables in their living room right now, because it's such riveting reading. And I got 10 doctors to raise their hand and be like, okay, this is interesting. And I had like a 20-page sales letter that outlined what this course was. And the course wasn't created yet. And finally, after the third notice and follow-ups, I got one doctor to fax in, and you remember faxes. You're of the age that you remember faxes. So not everyone would remember faxes, but every time a fax would ring in my dad's office, I'd be like sprinting over there and see if it was a doctor that gave me their money or not. And, awesome. And then finally it was like, and then I got $900 for this course. And I was so excited and elated. And then I'm like, oh, I have to go make this thing. So
you sold it before you made it. I love that.
Yeah, because I want to see if it's even worthwhile. And then that started me going. So I sent back a letter to the doctor saying, hey, this is going to be available in 30 days. We're not charging your card until then. And then got to work every single day, clocked out at 5 p.m., was working till like 3 o'clock in the morning many times, and creating this course material. And then that was kind of my first runway into being out on my own. And when it got to $15,000 a month, I was literally like answering my phone underneath my desk, trying to take calls from some doctors that were around the country buying this thing, and then also working as marketing and salesperson for my dad's business. And finally I'm like, no, I feel like I'm gonna take off and do my own thing. And so that was the real, so that was 98 and 99. And then the internet started becoming a bigger force. And I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. And I have no technical background whatsoever, but I'm like, I have all these skills now that I've learned about copywriting. And literally at 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up with this idea for instant sales letters. And instant sales letters became my first $1 million product. And within 3 months, I was on track to do 6 figures. And then people were like, oh, how did you do that? Could you teach me? Which then turned into me teaching internet marketing, information marketing, and all of that. And that was kind of my career for a long time. And then about 11 years ago, I kind of asked myself a really simple question, which was, am I happy? Would I be happy doing what I'm doing 10 years from now? And then the answer was no, which led me to this whole other exploration of how do you connect your head, your heart, your higher purpose.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was the most interesting journey, because before that point, 7 or 8 different projects all hit the $1 million mark without really breaking a sweat too much. And then this was this idea that in my journal, I'm like, okay, what would make me happiest? It'd be hanging out with my friends that are also amazing entrepreneurs. And we would have business sessions in the middle of nowhere. We would, like you mentioned, the Maverick group, we would fly big jets. We would go Baja dune buggy racing. We would do all these things. There'd be a charity component. There'd be, just a lot of fun to it. And then about $400,000 in, my wife's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I have no idea, but there's something here. And it really forced me to, so my passion and interest in the internet publishing space had really waned, because it didn't feel like the ultimate expression of who I was. And it was difficult. It was interesting because I was helping a lot of people. It was really gratifying to be able to take somebody who, I don't know, would sell guitar lessons locally, and then they put them up online, and all of a sudden they're financially independent because they could use the leverage of the internet. But I'm like,
Right.
that's not my real ultimate end all be all. So this original idea, Maverick Business Adventures. So then as that's sort of like going completely sideways, and then the publishing company is going down, it really forced me to look at my why. And the why wasn't to build an adventure travel company. It's to change the way business is played.
Nice.
And so it really forced me to like reevaluate everything about your identity, like your self-worth being connected to your net worth, your just like, because I had so closely identified with, okay, being this successful entrepreneur and all these things that were happening and easy and so forth. And then this, that was very unknown, it was literally like walking off a cliff in some way and being like, I think that there's something here. But along the way, I then created all these almost like puzzle pieces. By almost going out of business there, I was able to put these puzzle pieces together, which then became the Evolved Enterprise framework. From meeting people like you mentioned, Richard Branson, is one piece of that framework, but also a lot of unknown people that are doing amazing things in their business. They're having a greater impact, and that also grew their revenue, grew the way that their customers wanted to buy from them and become advocates and zealots, the way that their team members would be part of a greater mission. And so that became this Evolved Enterprise framework. And then when we applied that, it really turned things around. We had like a 800% kind of change in difference of what we were doing because of the greater impact. And then we also changed. So during this time was a lot of soul searching as well. And it was a lot of like, just, okay, what am I doing? Because I could easily have gone back to the internet marketing world, but that wasn't.
And still can anytime, which is nice, right?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I feel like a lot of, like, I'm not, there's so much has changed where it's like I'm definitely like, I understand the general, but the tactical part has changed so dramatically that you have to be an expert in one key thing. It's like, you can go so deep in it. It just felt like that's not my role. And so part of this was, okay, what is it? And there's just a lot of exploration. So I feel like the last 10 years has been a deep spiritual journey, actually.
So, and it's Evolved Entrepreneur, correct?
Evolved Enterprise is the name of the book. Yeah.
Evolved Enterprise. Okay. So then is that more focused on impact and kind of self-development, personal development, or how would you describe that now?
So Evolved Enterprise is this idea of it's almost like holding a paradox of that the business can actually create a greater difference in the world and make more money. And so a lot of people are like, well, I'll make a bunch of money and then I'll do something with it in the second half of my life. Or other people are like, well, I only care about this cause, and if I make money, great. But it's truly, so Forbes picked up a quote of mine, and this was a couple of years ago, basically saying that you had about 4 to 7 years that you have to have a core impact in what you do, or you're going to be at a competitive disadvantage. So it's this seismic shift that's happening from consumer buying behavior changing, that customers want to buy from companies that have a greater purpose, a greater meaning, and they're willing to either spend the same and change brands or change whatever company they buy from, or they're even willing to spend more. And then from the inside out, it's team members that want to work for a company that has a greater meaning and purpose. And that's where I think is really exciting, is that we get to use our head, which is our marketing side, our business side, to develop all those pieces that we've already got excited about that we can do in our marketing side, and then use our heart, which is how do we want to make a difference in the world, and then use our higher purpose, which to me is like, what were you designed to do here? Why were you brought here in some way? Or what'd you volunteer for? Or what's kind of your unique makeup? And then you align all of it together, and that's where Evolved Enterprise really shines. And that's where it's exciting for me, is to bring all those things back together. Because if you can apply direct marketing to a company that has amazing potential to do good, then it just turbocharges it. And you see this with like companies. So bigger companies have been experimenting with this for a while now, and it's sometimes called triple bottom line. It's called conscious capitalism. It's called for benefit. Like, there's a lot of names for it that are all in the same genre. And very early on, you only see like a negligible difference. But if you look at companies that have done research with companies that have a greater purpose and meaning across the S&P 500, they outperformed it by 1,400% over a 15-year period. So it starts like this, and then it goes dramatically up when you're aligned with your values and your core purpose. And that's what's exciting to me. It's like, okay, where is the leverage point of this?
So for everybody that's watching or listening, and they want to be an evolved enterprise. What's the short version of how one does that? Obviously, there's a lot more to it than we could talk about right here, but what are the key points?
Yeah, well, it's really about, number one, it's understanding that you could, that it doesn't have to be two separate things and then the other thing that I like to do is I think language is so important. As I started as a copywriter, right? So words are so important. So a lot of companies will talk about, okay, this is our giving back. Well, what does give back imply? It implies guilt, that we've taken something. So as entrepreneurs, we're value creators. The only way that we stay in business is by providing value. So we've already provided value. But so if you're thinking about impact or ripple of impact or whatever you want to call it, giving forward, I don't even love that as much, but whatever it is, it starts there, even like just this idea of the words that you're using. In bigger companies, it might call it corporate social responsibilities, CSR.
And is there like an exercise for doing that or something, or how do you come up with that?
Well, so to me, it all starts with you, like you as the founder. It has to start from you personally evolving in some way, shape, or form. So that's where the personal development that you were asking about comes from. So any of that work, and that's always a constantly evolving. You're never necessarily done with it. But that kind of work of exploring, okay, what am I uniquely gifted at? What do I love to do? At my highest level, what do I want to put out into the world? And then even like exploring some of the darker stuff, like our shadows, which is the stuff that we don't want to necessarily put out into the world, but that can sometimes drive our life in a very unconscious way.
Right.
So a shadow is, I don't know. And there's a light part to an archetype or to a characteristic, and then there's a dark type. So for instance, I'm a very good catalyst. Like I love starting stuff, but the shadow part of that is that I don't always finish things. So you have to explore that, and then you just start learning more and more about yourself. And then from that as well, you start thinking about, okay, what do I care about the most in the world? So for us, it's an entrepreneurial umbrella. We care about empowering entrepreneurs, and then so all the work that we do within our companies are around that part of it. And so for other people, it could be a very specific, maybe pain that they've experienced personally or within their family that they want to help right. I worked with one guy that his father died very early on in his life. Maybe he was like 7 or 8. And he decided, I never want any other kid to experience that. So he created, with my help, something called the Fit Father Project, where he would, make sure that to provide health and wellness and education for fathers. And even calling it the Fit Father Project was a certain sort of demographic now that he was targeting. And then the impact side of what they did. So I believe so you start with you, and then cause is the next one. So you're figuring out, what is the cause? What do we care about? And then it's baking into that cause, into your product or service. And then that builds the community, and it builds also the culture within your company. And so for him, they would do things like every pound lost equals $1 that they donated to a place called Camp Kesem, which sent kids that were going through hardships, through illness within their families, into these summer camps that they weren't really going to be able to experience anyway. So it was a really nice tie-in. And I love so there's a lot of ways in Evolved Enterprise. I talk about 11 different impact models. And that's where it gets exciting, when people can see the ideas and the models. So many people are familiar with TOMS and, Blake Mykowski. So Blake and I are friends, and I had a chance to interview him a couple of years back. And the only thing he would talk about was how many pairs of shoes they've given away. And not the only thing, but that was a big thing that they talked about. And that is like what I call an impact scorecard or scoreboard. So now at that point, it was 35 million pairs of shoes they've given away. And so he could say, okay, because baked in, they profitably could sell 35 million pairs of shoes. And that was it was a great marketing hook. It was just really, he hit it right at this beautiful intersection of companies that were just starting to do this. And so a lot of times companies are like, oh, we want to do this. And then they think about a buy one, give one model, but that's not always the right model. It can work in sometimes, but sometimes it's like trying to put a round peg in a square hole kind of thing. And so sometimes it works incredibly well, like Bombas, if you've seen the sock company, Damon John's an investor. I know
Yep.
Damon.
Yep.
And they've grown so fast because of that model of where you buy a pair of socks and then they give away a pair of socks to a homeless shelter. And then what they did was even better, is they made a better sock that they gave away. So it was like a antimicrobacterial sock. It was a dark colored sock. It had reinforced seams. It was just a better sock. And then I think one of the founders was like, if we sell 1 million pairs of socks, I'm going to get this tattoo of the logo on my wherever. And he's like, I think it'll take 10 years. And they got it in like 2.5 years. And now they're at like, I don't know, 8 or 9 or 10 million pairs of socks sold. So it's like amazing how that amplifies and accelerates what they're doing. But you need the good marketing too behind it. You need the good, like, you can't just have impact and be like, oh, well, we have the impact and then our story is going to get told or whatever. Like you start putting it all together and it gets turbocharged, and that's where it's exciting. But that's not the only way of doing it. There's so many other models as well.
So you mentioned there's 11. Is that what you said?
Right. Yeah.
Can you rattle through some of those?
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the fun ones. So there's also a direct impact. So it's like if I buy, I don't know, this water bottle, then maybe that we give away X amount of clean water to X communities, right? So it's a very specific outcome that is attributed to this thing. Like, so I'm wearing, I do have it. So I'm wearing this little bracelet here that's made out of ocean plastic. It's from a company called 4Ocean. And what they do is every single bracelet that they take out a pound of ocean plastic or trash. And then they use that to create the product. So it's a really nice, interesting tie-in. And I haven't seen their latest stats, but it's something like, I feel like it was like 8 million pounds of trash taken out, or 7 million. Like, it was quite a bit. So that means that they've sold, 8 million of these bracelets. And so what happens is the customers don't just become customers. They become advocates, and they become zealots, and they become it's a real community that you're building because they're tied into this greater mission. So that's one way. Another is that you get to choose your impact. So you can have if you have multiple products, one could be attributed to this cause, and one could be attributed to this cause. So based on, it could be a different color bracelet. It could be a different kind of pairs of socks. It could be a different watch with the different colored bands or something. There's a lot of ways of doing it. The other ones that I really love that get more involved. So in there, I talk about how do you move from a transactional company to a transformational company to even a transcending company. And transactional is you're competing on price, or you're competing on some sort of advantage that is probably going to go away. Transformational is that your identity changes with the relationship with the company. Like, literally everyone, the team, the people that are involved, the people that are buying it, like, their identities get changed. That I feel like, I've helped contribute to clean water. I've helped contribute to whatever. And if you do it at a high enough level, then there's even more, which is transcending what the business can be. Because I really do believe that business can be the greatest lever for making a difference in the world. And you look at all the ways that we as entrepreneurs can make a difference. Again, we're starting from baseline, which is, if you're in business already, you're a value creator. But there's a lot of ways that we can leverage what we're doing. So whether it's our product or service itself, our talent within the organization, like, how do we apply our ideas and talent within the organization for something greater? Our supply chain, what do we, where are we buying from? What is our level of consciousness, and how do we bring that forth? What is our employees? Like, how do we bring together this one model I called empowered employment, and then the other is our voice. Like, so how do we use our voice and leverage in the marketplace to become a lighthouse? So this empowered employment is one other model. There's a company called Ultra Testing that I really love. And what they did is they took people who were on the autism spectrum scale and said, okay, we're gonna do quality control testing for cross-browser platforms and different iOS systems or whatever, which, typically would require someone that wants to pay more attention to detail, that is okay with more repetitive tasks, that, so they took something which could be looked at as a tremendous disadvantage and said, no, that we're going to make this a competitive advantage in our company by hiring people on this neurodiversity.
That's really cool. I hadn't heard about that. That's really cool.
It's really interesting, right? So then this is a way of transcending what business can be, because it's not just like exploiting this group of people. It's truly like using gifts and talents in a different way. And it's a win for everyone. That's where I get excited. It's like, okay, how do we layer in these impact elements and things like that? So there's another model called Source Matters, which is taking a look at, okay, what is the source of whatever we're creating, and how do we make that into a greater, higher level of good. So one of my favorite examples is a company called Elvis and Crest. They're a little small company out of the UK, and the two designers were walking down the street and they saw all this fire hose that was laying out that was going to get trashed. And they're like, oh, A, it's going to all get in landfill. It's going to be a massive waste. But B, this is amazing material. What can we do with it? So then they turned it into belts and shower dop kits and iPad covers and keychains and all this stuff. And what's really interesting then is they take 50% of their profits, and then the full circle part of it is it goes back into fireman and firewoman charities. And so I love this kind of like full circle nature. That's where source matters.
And the connectivity of it too, also, I think, from the material to the thing. That's
exactly
nice.
Exactly. Right. So there's like, so you can do it in a way that is more transactional to you. Like, okay, well, we'll give, I don't know, 1% or 5% of our profits to this particular cause. But when you start tying it into a greater way, then it gets more exciting. That's where the story starts really coming alive, and that's where the marketing starts coming alive as well, because we can do some things that help spread that story.
Right.
And with that source matters, there's lots of ways. There's one entrepreneur that looked at these rotting bananas they weren't going to be perfect bananas that could get sold. And they're like, okay, well, what's going to happen with all of them? And he's like, well, I can turn them into this basically banana chips, or not even chips. They're like smushy banana. I don't know what they are, like kind of like a mix between a chip and a granola bar, but they're just dried bananas, and they're called Barnana. You've probably seen some of them. And so they've become a pretty decent sized company by taking something that would have been thrown out anyway. There's companies that are using the pit of, I don't know if you love coffee, but coffee comes out of these cherries, and they just use the bean and roast the bean, but the cherry part is just discarded. So it's like, okay, how do we use that and turn it into something else that the farmers get additional revenue for? And so then they create coffee flour and other byproducts of it. So there's all these ways of looking at what could be done in a greater capacity. And that's where it's really exciting.
That is really cool. Now, so is this from a book that you've written?
Yeah, so this is Evolved Enterprise, talks about the concept and the framework for it, and of course my story of kind of uncovering all this, and it's truly something that I put my heart and soul into, and I also put my own doodles into it, so you get to see a few of my drawings.
See your art. I like it. So what's the best place for folks to get a copy of that if they were interested in doing that, or to get a hold of you if they want to talk to you about all these things in more detail?
Amazon or evolvedenterprise.com. We have a limited edition kind of a set on there, which also goes to support a group called Village Enterprise that I love, that trains micro enterprises in East Africa.
Nice. That's really great. So I don't want it to keep you too much longer, but I do think that it would be interesting for people to, because you have a reputation for bringing groups together, building communities, tying in celebrity components all the way back to underground. You would create celebrities because you'd find these people who were under the radar, but you'd also bring in people that were well known as well. And then you connected with Branson and things like that. What's the best way for somebody that wants to have that positive impact, be that evolved enterprise, to accelerate and amplify their ability to get the message out by tying into those kinds of things?
Well, I mean, that's actually so fascinating, because as you start doing more and more of these things and connecting to the impact that you could do within your company, a lot of times you'll find celebrities will want to be a part of it, or other advocates or other channel partners, or they want to be associated. It gives them a halo effect as well. And bigger brands that have greater distribution come to you, or it's easier to do that. So, but the aspect of like celebrities are, it's almost like a masterclass in and of itself. But to me,
I just want you to tell us all how to do it in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. Well, so it really comes down to me, just like, when we talked about language being so important and how you do things, like, to me, it comes down, a lot of it is intention, right? So it's like, if I'm looking to just have a transactional relationship where I pay someone to show up and then they do X, Y, and Z, then that's great. And that's usually the way it stops, right? So now, are you going to have to pay in some cases? Yes, absolutely. Sometimes you're very much in that. And I've had many times where I pay to play, because it puts you in that same room and puts you in that same place. But then what happens after usually comes from the intention that you bring forward. So for me, like you mentioned, networking aspect, and I think this applies in a broader sense. So when I meet people, one of my favorite questions is, what are you most excited by right now? And that doesn't necessarily mean what business are you most, or whatever. It's like, just what are you most excited by right now? Because now that opens up the door to them to say, like for you, I don't even know what it would be. Let's play it out right now, without a net. What are you most excited by right now, Roland?
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
I'm most excited right now about the project that I started, which is helping the businesses that are in trouble as a result of the COVID situation to be able to continue, so that there's the legacy for the people who started those businesses and own them. There's continuity of employment and re-employment for the people who have given those businesses their gift of being employed, and also to help the continuity for the customers who are being served by the businesses, because if those businesses go away, then those customers can no longer be served, and all three of those things then lend themselves to restarting the economy as quickly as possible. So I'm very focused on that program.
Yeah, so I love that. So then, what I would do is I'd be like, hey, here's, have you thought about this, or have you thought about this way of maybe incorporating whatever impact into this that makes it even like it's already an impact oriented, because what you talked about are those three things that are very much cause aligned about the greater why. And it's also an incredible opportunity. Like there's a financial opportunity for everyone involved, and it's a win-win-win. So then it's like, okay, how can we make that even better? And then within a little bit of a conversation, I'd be finding out, are there any holes that you don't have kind of lined up? And then, so that could be an introduction that I make, or it could be someone that I know, or literally just, brainstorming with you and putting out an idea about, hey, have you thought about this? Like, is there a way to say, okay, now everyone who bought one of these companies, so they're buying in for XYZ, and they already have like the way that have been running their company. But what if when they came in, and this is actually really interesting to me, like what if when they came in that they were trained a little bit in evolved enterprise concepts, and they could add.
I'm already thinking about that. I love that.
Like, so that would be a win for me. I would love that. And then B, like all I care about is like, how do we nudge the consciousness of the world by even 1 degree using the leverage of business? So it's like they walk in, they're already a savior and helping, but then how do they elevate what that company is doing? And that's where I get excited. And then it's also going to help them make more money. And then you and I have had a few, like a super brief conversation about another thing that we're doing that could be a tie-in, which is called Evolved Profits, which is expense reduction with an evolved enterprise aspect to it. And so that would be the other thing that I would have mentioned to you as well. And so it becomes a win for you with the key project that you're most passionate about. And that's how I built a lot of my relationships. And not from a way of being like, oh, okay, now if I introduce this person to this person, that means they'll probably owe me. And then I could, use that in this way to like, so.
Tell you that transactional approach is the biggest turnoff to me. And there's a couple of people who've been trying to do business with me for a few years now. Right. And I've told them that, like I've just said, listen, that's a transactional approach. I'm not, because they're like, if I introduce you to this person, will you do this? If I get you this thing, will you do that? And I'm like, no, because that's not what I want. I want you to do it if you feel that what I'm doing will be good for whoever you're going to introduce me to. Cool. But I don't do transactional. I really don't like those relationships at all. And I've found that the quickest way to annoy especially successful people is to try to be transactional with them, because they're not at that place either, even though you may desperately need whatever it is that you want them to do. You have to not try to, I call it middling the deal, right? You can't middle the deal. Either you bring value, which to me is what your responsibility is. Being a connector, to me, that's pretty worthless if you're making your life off of connecting people. But if you can connect people and add value, then you can connect and make money, and you're not transactional. And anything else, you just give away. Give that connection away, because it will be karmatic for you, right?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing. I mean, it's a very philosophical thing too about. So I'll bring it down to like almost an example that everyone's probably had, where you're walking down the street and maybe there's a homeless person that's asking for cash, right? So if I put $1 or $2 into the jar, or $5 or whatever it is, or $5, $10, $20, and I'm like, oh, well, that person, I need you to use that money only to do X, Y, and Z. I've now created attachment in some way. And so if I'm giving from simply just wanting to give and not having any expectation of what happens, that's the exact same thing here. So when I meet somebody that I love what they're doing in the world, I want to help accelerate that. I want to amplify what they're doing. So then it's like, oh, you should talk to so-and-so because they have a database of people that I think would love to hear about that. Or this is a key resource that you need, or whatever it is. And
Right.
so my value add, or where I look at it, because if I introduce you, Roland, to so-and-so, and so-and-so thought that my introduction was a terrible introduction, then I'm going to have a harder time ever getting that person's attention again. Because,
of course, it's your social capital.
Exactly. So it's like, it has to work for both parties as well. And it has to be a value add, and it has to be something that, what I go by is like, okay, how do we make whatever is happening bigger and better for everyone involved? And,
right.
And that I'm going to get sent, I don't know, a finder's fee or whatever it is. And sometimes there is like that happens, and that's part of it. And everyone, and they know that going in, but that's not the main objection.
Oh yeah. Not the main objective, and not the main, and not the expectation. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Well, I could talk with you all day long, and I know you've got other things you have to do, but I definitely want to chat with you more about how we can work together, see how that works on the stuff that we were talking about. And I'd like to connect you with some of our other groups, and thank you for coming. Also, for everybody that wants to follow, get a hold of you, it's evolvedenterprise.com.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
You can buy the book on Amazon as well. And do you have a podcast or any of the socials you like for folks to connect with you on?
I don't know. Instagram, I'm fairly active on. Not super, but it's just Yanik Silver, Yanik Silver, at Yanik Silver. Or I blog every once in a while at yaniksilver.com. And then I have something new that's pretty cool that I have to send you. I don't know if I've sent it to you, but it's called the Cosmic Journal. It's like
I haven't seen it.
It's a hand-drawn, illustrated journal that works like an oracle. And
that is awesome.
It came from me hand-drawing pages for 108 days. And so that's available at cosmicjournal.com or at Amazon. And it's totally different. It's very artistic, but it's I call it the Galactic Instruction Manual you were missing when you were born to remember your destiny here.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate you being on the show, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right.